Casey Seiler from the Times Union for Dr. Steingraber. If indeed you make the case that there is no level of regulation that's going to be sufficient to make this process safe, and if you consider this round of regulations to be something of a joke, what sort of is the point of inserting this number of comments into kind of the regulatory process?
Well, silence is consent, and so we're sending a strong political message, as well as fulfilling our obligations as citizens to comment on a regulatory comment period. So no matter how absurd it is, given that these are legal placeholders, many of us felt we wanted to turn that, the opportunity to offer a comment on the public record as something meaningful. And so we began to look closely at these regulations, and in the process of doing that, we learned a lot of things. For one of the regulations, for example, that I worked on recently was the one that governs beneficial use determination, which is an arcane part of the regulations, which essentially changes the name of the wastewater that flows out back out of a fracked well and calls it now production brine and gives it a new use. It's like regifting. Now we can use it to de-ice our roads. However, it's full of radium in some cases, not all cases, but there are parts of the Marcellus Shale, which represents an old seafloor, right? 400 million years ago, this shale was laid down as the bed of an ancient ocean, and because there were an ancient mountain range located where the Catskill Range is now that entirely eroded into this ancient sea, all of the uranium that was contained inside that mountain ended up at the bottom of the ocean. And so there are the pockets of radium, uranium, barium, and other radioactive things. And so the fluid that comes back up in pockets of the Marcellus has a lot of radiation in it, and yet this is what, and heavy metals like arsenic, and this is what we're proposing to de-ice our roads. Cars go over it, kick up the dust, we inhale it, it lands on pasture grass, consumed by cows, gets into the food chain, and so forth. And so I did a lot of that research and laid it out for the public, who then wrote their comments. And so as part of my 30 days project, I didn't tell people what to say. People came to their own conclusions and sometimes added their own research. So commenting on these regs was an act of us educating ourselves as much as it was sending a very strong political message.
So DEC isn't necessarily the audience here, it was the process.
Of course, DEC, so as I said, DEC is one of the two audiences here, right? I mean, we're telling DEC that the regulations are the emperor that has no clothes. There's no science behind these regulations, which is in violation of STAPA rules and regulations, which say that we need to have, every time you come up with a reg, like a drill rig can be located 500 feet from somebody's house, you have to actually cite the scientific basis for saying that that's sufficiently protective for health and safety. That hasn't been done here. So a lot of these comments in these boxes actually address themselves to the fact that this is an arbitrary rule. Where's your science, DEC? So that's one message. And then, of course, the other message is for our governor.